Hello and welcome to another Daily Muppet. This is my first from my home office that I've just been getting set up. I still have a few things to do, some lights and decorations, and I have this really nice board that was sent to me. I'll leave a link below, but it was actually from a viewer. So you see it's got like all the title years and stuff. Really, really nice, really good quality. It was sent to me by one of the actual viewers here, and who wanted to, who just thought, hey, why don't I send you one of these? And I thought, hey, that's a great idea. I'm setting up my home office, and we can do this. We can set it up. And he sent it to me, and now I'm finally getting my office fully set up. So hopefully I'll hang it up soon and display it and all that. I'll leave a link below to their website. They're not paying me or anything like that. It's just, again, it's a user. He sent it to me. It's really nice. So, if you want something similar, I'm sure you can get it from them. I'll leave a link below on that. But today I want to discuss Dorgu. I want to talk about Garnacho, a little bit of info there. Talk about Rashford and some of the comments. I think Ornstein did a few things this morning, made some comments and an interview or something that came out. And I want to talk as well about potential replacements and signings, as well as go over some points on the financials of United, because as I believe it's important to continue to keep presenting real information on what's actually happening and the real problems that are ongoing at the moment, so that people can understand them. It's always good to understand what's actually happening with things. So let's get into it. First, let's talk about Garnacho. So it's interesting. I first want to talk just a little bit about, again, why the situation is as it is. Okay, the biggest factor that we're looking at right now is he would not be for sale. He would not necessarily be going anywhere if there were not doubts between Amorim and the club about his fit in the system and at United under Amorim. That is fundamental to this. Amorim wants to ensure that he has a team that is best fit for what he wants, and that's what he's building here. And that's what we need to do, right? Is to build a team that is going to fit an exact ideology, an exact philosophy moving forward and continue with it. There are doubts over his fit. I've said this many, many times, and that is the main reason he's been looking at other options. This is not behind the club's back. This is not, none of this is done essentially where they're not pushing him out the club, but if it's seen that his best interest is to go to somewhere else to fit in better, then fair enough. And the club can then, of course, take money that would come from that and reinvest it to build the squad more directly in the image that Ruben Amorim wants. So that's what's happening. Now, there's been some talk, of course, of Napoli still being in the race. They've obviously kind of nearly agreed a fee with Dortmund over Adeyemi at a lower amount, but there's still doubts as to whether Adeyemi will want to join them. So they're still in talks with Garnacho's representatives, according to DiMarzio. They have never really totally walked away, but if they cannot get it done, then with Adeyemi, then they'll still be interested in Garnacho. United will still want north of £50 million as a base fee, which I think would mean they have to go up another 10 or so euros on what they were offering to get there. They were still a good 15 million away, so it wasn't that close from Napoli in terms of what the overall fee would be. Chelsea remain in talks with United. As I explained this a bit yesterday, but I didn't think it would be so much of like a official bid in, bid rejected, bid in, bid rejected type of thing. They're in talks, and those talks have been ongoing for a few days. There's good contacts between the two clubs, good relationships between the two clubs. And what you'll get is, which we'll talk about with replacements in a second here, is, of course, that in these discussions, Chelsea are going to be bringing up, hey, what about this player that we have that we could potentially use as a make weight or as a part of the deal, not necessarily it's not really a swap, but as a make weight, as a possible. So you saw a lot of stuff coming about Nkunku. Well, why does that happen? Because Chelsea walk into it and say, okay, we really like Garnacho. Are there any players that you want? Nkunku is someone we're looking to move on. Is there any deal there that you'd be interested in? They would still be separate transactions, separate deals. Everybody gets it on the books properly, but they're asking about that. And so as a matter of course, United with these discussions is contacting and talking to those player representatives to find out their situations. Are they interested? What would their wage demands be? What would this look like? What would that look like? All the different things that you'd want to do as a part of your due diligence as if you were signing a player, as just a part of exploring this deal. So they're doing all of that as a part of these discussions with Chelsea, and the deal is not going to get into like explicit stages unless you find somewhere in there that it's of interest to United, it's of interest to players potentially, it's of interest to everyone involved, and then you put together formal proposals. It's not going to be like trying to force it or ram it down anyone or just send money and hope United accept or something like that. So there's a few different ways that this could still play out. But as what I was told last night, very late, is that there has been some progress on this. There has been some movement. That doesn't mean it's there. That doesn't mean it's for sure happening yet. But there is a very good chance that Garnacho could leave, and that at the moment some talks have continued to kind of progress with Chelsea to where there are some interesting proposals that are not out the realm of actually being acceptable, that are being discussed at this point in time. So there's more due diligence to be done, more to happen to see if any of these proposals will actually come through. But there are there are things being proposed in these discussions that could potentially work, and it is at this moment moving closer towards happening than not happening. That it is moving closer towards Garnacho going to Chelsea than it is moving the other direction, and it is progressing. Okay, so I don't know what on balance I'd put it. I'd probably lean towards it being more likely Garnacho goes than stays in this window at this point in time. But we'll still see. It's obviously nothing is done. There's a few things that I would have put money on happening that so far have not yet, and I'm still feeling doubts on, like Rashford and like Dorgu. So we will get to that. But effectively, once again, this is happening not because I 1,000% guarantee you, again, that anybody saying the different is uninformed, incorrect, or making it up for their own reasons, that Garnacho is not being sold against the wishes of the manager and forced out by the club. Okay? That is not what's happening. That is not the scenario. That is not where we're at. It is actually something that probably suits all parties should he move on. And that is the same with Rashford that we'll get to in a second. In terms of the replacements, yes, United have had interest in the past in Nkunku, but it would definitely very much be likely on loan. It's a risk that they don't want to take. One of the things that they've had a big issue with, of course, is injuries, is fitness. It's not so much a question of fit. One of the reasons why they're looking at it and they like it is because naturally Nkunku is almost a perfect fit. He is a lot of the attributes he brings are pretty well perfect for kind of the 10 position in a flexible 3 up there. You want more narrow players in there, and he fits in that quite well as a playmaker. He's played well in small spaces. He's actually got really good numbers for Chelsea this year when he's playing. I was sort of surprised in looking at that the other day. I mean, he's scoring or assisting like every 70 minutes or something, but he's not playing that much, and some of those, of course, are against low competition. That being said, I wouldn't trust our players to score against the Colorado Rapids at this point in time, so I can't really knock that. He's got 2 goals, 1 assist in the Premier League, but only 300 minutes. A lot of substitute appearances in 10 minutes or so. It's a little bit of an odd situation that I guess he just doesn't fit at Chelsea. He would fit at United from a profile standpoint really well. They kind of know of him. The issue, of course, is that he's been injured He had a huge injury, big bad knee injury, and then missed almost another year on top of that with other kind of injuries that probably came about as a result of that knee injury as well. So he's not been injured in about 10 months now, which is maybe different to, say, like Mason Mount as an example, who was unfortunately it was the season we bought him that he was still kind of injured. But Nkunku hasn't been injured since May of last year, so he's been healthy, but he hasn't played that much. And obviously that's still a risk. That's still a major risk. And that would be a big reason why United at this point in time aren't necessarily wanting to buy him. But I'm quite sure they would be open to the concept of a loan, which of course would not mean they wouldn't get the money for Garnacho as well. But perhaps a loan, perhaps with an option. João Felix is obviously one people have discussed. United have been very interested in him in the past. He probably would fit as well. You'd have similar, not the same doubts, but different doubts over him, over whether he's good enough, whether he can hack it in the Premier League, all of that. United are definitely interested in other players like Tyler Dibbling, not just Chelsea players, right? Players like Tyler Dibbling, they're definitely interested in and following. We'll see if it's possible to get them in this window or not, or what the right cost would be. Obviously, one of the advantages with the Chelsea deal is if you can get a player back on loan, then at least it guarantees you have somebody in the door should you let Garnacho go to use as an option for the rest of the season, and you still have the financial wherewithal to go spend a lot and try to get other players coming in. So it's still up in the air. We know like a lot of the major targets that will be there come summer, but they will try to get some of them now. The issue is with limited time left and it being the January window, you don't want to waste the money you may gain from a sale by vastly overpaying for somebody. And I mean vastly. I'm not talking 5 million, but paying 20, 30 million over the odds for somebody. Like you're not going to pay 60 million pounds for Tyler Dibbling after selling Garnacho for 60 million pounds. You probably would give him an offer at 30 to 35, which is probably what he's worth. He's a good player. Maybe more. I don't know, but for example, anyway. So we'll see where this goes. We'll see if Napoli come back in and drive this up a little bit, but talks are ongoing between Chelsea and United over the weekend. And maybe by Monday, we'll see where they shake out. We might get linked to other players. There might be, more things that come out as we do due diligences on different names and things like that as well that Chelsea may be offering. There's certainly other names that I would hope we would check out. That would be interesting if Chelsea are open to talking about them in the deal, but we will obviously have to see. But that is what's happening. I believe that progress is being made, at least on something occurring here, and that it's moving closer to a potential exit, but there's still room to run on this. On Rashford, obviously, same story, waiting for Barcelona, as we know, as his ideal spot. Now, you will notice that, like David Ornstein said that, United want, I think, what did he say here? He said, United want to sell him. Let's see. I'm just going to go back to this. He said, United looked into signing Nuno Mendes. We talked about that. It's too expensive. Yeah. United want to sell Rashford. The club initiated a sale. Barcelona working on it. And this is correct. This is true. This is not totally different to the Garnacho situation in that there were, when you have to look at, there's three factors that balance into all of this, right? Which is number one, their fit into the team. Number two, their adaptability. And number three, and what they want, right, is part of their adaptability. And number three, their value to the club and what they could mean for replacements. Both Garnacho and Rashford represent a big value to the club for the replacements. So if Amorim's not sure of their fit and they're not sure of their fit and they're not sure of their adaptability, then it makes sense for the club to say, okay, well, selling seems like the best bet for everybody and would be the ideal scenario for everyone, and we can reinvest that money. And that is probably the case in this case, and that is essentially what's happened with Rashford as well. Where it did kind of blow up is that for some reason, and I've mentioned this before when it comes down to these leaks and things, this all kind of leaked out in December. Now, Garnacho has been exploring options with the club's blessing, essentially, since December also, but you didn't hear anything about it until much more recently, when it kind of came out falsely that the club were trying to force him out or something like that, just for PSR purposes, when that's not what's happened. But for some reason, it came out about Rashford after he was dropped, as was Garnacho, and then he did his interview, which probably exacerbated the issue and is the reason why he's not in the team, because it was more public, which is not necessarily what they wanted, which is, again, why Garnacho is still playing, because he's handled it a bit differently. And, so everybody would like, again, that's why he said he doesn't have an issue with Amram, because there's really not a problem here. If he doesn't fit, he doesn't fit. That's not a personal issue with him and the manager and all of that. And so it would seem to make sense that, that a sale's on the cards here. The problem, of course, is finding a value for him. Garnacho's getting good offers at this point in time, at least closer to good offers. Rashford is not. He's on much bigger wages, so that makes it harder for buying clubs. We're still hoping for Barcelona. He's still hoping for Barcelona. We'll see where this goes. In the meantime, he's in training. If he stays beyond the window, would he play? Probably. He'd probably end up back in the team and then be sold in the summer. I don't think it would change the long-term view, barring some massive shift in the way that he plays that makes him or Amram feel that he is most fit into the team and suddenly has adapted well enough to play and to stay and to be, of starter quality, because you have to consider that with his wages and value, that he has to be up to potentially a higher level. You can't have $350,000 on the bench. That is fair. That's where the wages factor is fair. That's where it matters. So we have to move on to see what happens with that. They would still definitely hope that he can move, and it would help give us more funds financially for whatever else that we need to do and hopefully could do, including potential replacements in this window for him and Garnacho, as well as potentially contributing to the Dorgu deal. Now, on Dorgu, I think United were a little bit surprised that it didn't progress a little bit easier after their second bid that went in around 33 million euros or so, as I heard it. That was near the maximum that they can do without raising further funds. And they're really scraping, and I'm going to talk about the finances in a second here. But so I think that they were a little surprised. Now, I went back and looked, and it is correct that Lecce have been asking for 40 million euros since summer. Both Chelsea and Tottenham are interested, but did not pay that money. I don't think that means anything. It just means that Lecce have been pretty consistent in asking for that. They know that they could sell him to someone else and get a loan back for the rest of the 6 months, potentially. They know that they could sell him in summer, maybe for a little bit less, but then they'd have him for the 6 months. So it's an interesting one. My view on it, personally, is that they'll get it done and that they should. I don't think that paying 37 or 38 million euros, which will probably do the deal, 3 to 4 million more, is you bending over, is you doing this. It's just, if they value him at 20, they shouldn't go that high. But if they value him at 30 to 33, then you essentially look at him and say, that's just January tax. That's not United tax, that's January tax. You're buying a player for maybe 5 to 8 million more than he's worth in January. Those aren't the things that kill you. It's paying 72 million for a striker that you valued at 40 and was priced at 40 in Rasmus Højlund. It's paying 80 million for a winger that you valued at 25 and was priced at 30 or 40 million. It's paying 60 million for a center back that was valued at 40. It's paying 80 million for a center back that was 40 the previous season. You're talking about 30, 40 million overpays in this in the instances of things that have really hurt United, not 4 million euros for a player in January that they really needed. We probably overpaid a little bit for Bruno. Sporting were pretty hard on their line there, and they just didn't budge. We went to the end of the window, and we ended up paying 60 million. It's worked out really well. Nobody looks at Bruno and says, oh, it's a huge overpay. The bigger problem is when you make significant overpay and the player doesn't work out, then it's really trouble for your financials and for your negotiating power in future. I don't see that being an issue with a deal like this. Talks are set to continue between United and Lecce new contacts, so hopefully they do get this deal done. I think it's such a crucial position that it's worth just doing. It's just worth doing it. It's just worth getting done at the end of the day. That's my opinion on it, of course. My opinion only on that it is worth it, but I do think they will go for it. I do think they will go for it. I do think they will get it done at the end of the day. I think that they will, and talks are set to continue on that front. Okay, so now, given all of that, that's where we're going. I wanted to just explain the situation here in terms of the finances. Let's see if I got this right, because I want a new computer. Oh, yeah. Okay, it's just got this little weird thing that's on the screen that I didn't want. Anyway, I wanted to explain the finances and kind of the problem that we're actually running into, okay? So I'm doing this without using very specific numbers in general, but just to demonstrate kind of the point and make it, again, I think it's really important to continue to make this understandable to people as to what's actually happening and just what is, it's not about discussion, it's not about argument, it's not about agendas, but really what is, okay? There are a lot of different types of expenses, and that's really what I've broken down here and wanted to look at. So first of all, you've got your player wages and transfers, right? So this big bar represents in different colors the different maybe major categories of expenses that United are spending right now. And I didn't use specific numbers because it's kind of hard to break it all down exactly, but we can break it down to some degree. The biggest bulk of it are player wages and transfers, okay? Now, an important thing to note on this player wages and transfers aspect of it is we don't want this to go down, right? We're never going to spend less on players to be successful. We don't need to spend less on transfers. We don't want to spend less on transfers. We don't need to spend less on wages. We don't want to spend less on wages. What we want to do is spend better what we spend, right? That's the issue. It's not how much, because our wages aren't top of the league anymore, and wage has the highest correlation to league table, but so does, obviously transfer has a big impact on that. We haven't actually spent, I think, even the most on transfers over the last 3 years in terms of net. I believe it's Chelsea, right? So player wages and transfers are not really going to go down. You just want to do it better, okay? And I'll explain, of course, why in a second. Then you've got club expenses. Well, between what we need, and this is why, again, this can't go down. They'll look at it and say, if we need to keep up with City and Chelsea, it's going to have to be in this range. It's not going to get lower. But we do need to spend better. The club expenses, this is your general staff, non-playing staff, all of those other things. The things you're seeing all the cuts for are here because, of course, these are also contracted. You can't do anything about them. You can't cancel players' contracts. You can't cancel deals that you're already expending. So they can't actually do anything about this. But things like the ambassador fees, the 250 staff, all of that comes out of this. Okay, that's here. And they're saying, okay, just between our wages and transfers and our general club expenses, we're already over our revenue. That is correct. Okay, just between, without debts and borrowings included, they're already losing money on the basis of wages and transfers and club expenses. Okay, that is a fact. You remove the debts, United are still losing a significant amount of money. Okay, on their spending. Now, you're still losing a significant amount of money every single year. So that's not a good position to be in because it means you're always behind, and that means you're always pumping money. And now one could argue that you should be able to do that, but there is a limitation to how much matters, right, in terms of losses and how out of control that gets. So here, they're looking to reduce expenses. For sure. A lot of the cuts that have come out of this area to try to get this down to where they have space between the revenue their general expenses just for running the club between transfers, player wages, and club expenses, right? So that's where a lot of cuts are. In this area, we don't actually want to see cuts. We may see cuts temporarily as we get rid of and move some high earners on, but the whole point of doing that is so that you can reinvest and fill it back up with good transfers. If you shift to Marcus Rashford's $300,000 a week and Casemiro's and Eriksen's and you bring this down quite a bit, which it does go down quite a bit, then you want to use that space to make new transfers. And that's what they're banking on. They have to use this space to make new transfers because we don't have money anywhere else. So they have to reduce this to increase it, but it's always going to refill if we're going to stay competitive. If we start dropping it, then we're going to just move down the table because we're going to stop buying competitive players and paying competitive wages. Okay? So they cut from here. Between that, then there's two different types of debt, okay? There are club borrowings. Now look, because the club expenses are over the revenues, that means United are losing money every year. So what do? They borrow. That's what they've been doing, okay, over the last 3 to 4 years. Since 2020, actually, since COVID, I believe. This is this $300 million that they've borrowed off of the Bank of America credit card or credit line or what have you. Again, I'm not trying to be too specific on this, but this is what's happening. That they fill up and then ideally pay down through the year. And on that, you pay interest. You pay money. It costs you money to borrow $300 million. And they're borrowing the money because we don't have enough money to pay the bills. So they have to borrow money because the club is being run at a loss. That means they're borrowing more money to pay those bills and hoping they can pay it down. And that's a cash flow issue too. But that is different to the Glazer debt. So there's an enormous amount of finance costs. $60 million a year is correct, was posted by Kieran McGuire. Not all of that is Glazer debt. If you actually read the financials, a good chunk of it is the club's borrowings. And there are things like finance costs on player expenses and things like that too that factor into it. And a huge chunk of it is the Glazer debt. So yes, it would be absolutely ideal to erase this debt, to move it out of here. The problem is that, again, just on this point, it's the Glazer debt. If Sir Jim, say, pays this money today, right, and gets rid of it, here's the biggest problem that we have. The Glazers own the club. They're the majority shareholders. Sir Jim only has sporting control. When they sit down to agree the budget for the next year on July 1st, if that debt was paid off, you know what the Glazers can do again? They can take out a new credit card. But they actually can. They could just open a new credit line. They could take out more debt. They can do whatever they want because they own the club. There is no guarantee. So in order to pay the debt off, he would want to have, of course, equity or control or some sort of agreement that would prevent new debt from being leveraged onto the club, because new debt can be leveraged. That's what this is. It's club borrowings. The Glazers could, because the agreement that they have, for example, on things like dividends and all of that, is temporary. It was part of the purchase agreement, and the whole goal of it was Sir Jim and Ineos wanting to get time to fix what they can and maybe take, in that time, work out ways that they could buy more of the club. That is not a forever agreement. There is a point here where, with the Glazers being majority shareholders, they can start to take dividends again, and they can continue to borrow against the club, and they can do all sorts of things that they are allowed to do as owners of the club. That's an issue. So it's not just even simply a matter of, out of the goodness of one's heart, paying the debt off, because there are so many problems with it. It strengthens their financial hold and even gives them the opportunity to take more money out of the club later. So people have to think that through. The ideal scenario is, of course, that what needs to happen is that Sir Jim needs to take over the club in total and duplicate his offer that he just made, the offer that he got in the first place to get his to the 29%. Do it again by the end of this year, make another offer like that to become majority owner, and then he can have a bit more control, and then we can talk about shifting debts and things like that. So that's what needs to happen. There's absolutely no doubt in anyone's mind that we need someone to take over from the Glazers, because until that happens, there's no point doing things like paying off the debts. But even with this debt removed, you still have major problems, which is that the club is still completely in a hole upside down. It is losing an enormous amount of money because PSR isn't even everything, okay? If we put this, little bastard, go back where I want you to go. If we put this debt back in, between player wages and transfers, club expenses, club borrowings, and Glazer debt, we reached about our 35 million yearly losses. That means 115 million or so. It's actually 105. This is probably like, I don't know, it's 34 million or something. Maybe my math is, no, that's 105. My math is good. That's 105. 35 million yearly losses to reach 105 over a 3-year period. That's PSR. That means we just met PSR. That means we just met our PSR guidelines so we don't get penalties. We just made it that we don't get penalized. That's how close we are. So, of course, in order to spend, you've got to reduce in order to buy, right? Because we cannot go over that cap. Hence, in January, we are sell to buy. Now, one of the reasons we made it to that cap is because we reduced these, which used to be higher. These used to be bigger, but by reducing them, we were able to, by reducing some of the club expenses, cutting staff, cutting extra expenses, things like that, we were able to get ourselves below that number. On top of that number is an estimated 65 million to 80 million, potentially, that has been spent on things that are deductible from profit and sustainability rules. Spending on the academy, spending on a women's team. And I think it's less than this most years, but it also unfortunately included the Glazers giving the club the bill for the takeover, which they were able to deduct, fortunately, or PSR would have been in real trouble, but it was still money that they charged the club for, okay? That they did. The Glazers charged the club for, okay? But even still, you have to realize the problem with this. These are deductible from PSR, right? But so long as you're still losing a lot of money, that means how are you paying for this? Because you still have to pay for it, even if it's deductible. You have to borrow, and that keeps making the borrowings go up if you're losing every single year. So there's 2 solutions that are being aimed for. One is obviously reducing expenses. How low can we get all of this? Can we minimize this to a point where, you know, and again, I just want to add that one of the things that the money Sir Jim invested in the club does help with is this club borrowings. It potentially reduces the amount that we have to borrow because it gives us more cash in the bank, right? Even if it doesn't help PSR directly, it does. Because let's say instead of borrowing 300 and having a 300 million on a credit, we only have to have, you know, through the year that we pay down most of it. We don't need to borrow this money every year and then pay down, and we don't have these finance costs. Well, that minimizes it. So his investment is covering some debt. By giving us cash flow, it's reducing the amount that we have to pay ideally for finance costs. We'll probably find out about that, how much that's affected it this year after June 30th. But maybe in the quarterly reports, we'll see that finance costs are lower. We'll have to look at that. I actually don't know. Hold on. I could actually probably find it for the first quarter and see and make it comparable, but I don't know if it breaks all those details down. But yeah, it would be, we only were posted maybe I think we posted a small loss during the quarter. I have to break it down further, but effectively, this is where the money that Sir Jim has invested, that 300 million US that he's put in, may make a difference. By giving us more cash flow, it's going to reduce our borrowings. So that's going to bring this all down quite a bit. That's good because the less money we lose, the less we have to borrow. Right? Now, the other thing that we want to do is, of course, by spending better, we need to bring our revenue up. How far up can we bring it? Ideally, pretty far, because we've been losing out on 60 to 80, potentially 60, 80 million or more by being bad, right? So probably 60. So in theory, if we can do this all, and this is the plan, right, is if we can do all of this, bring this all down, bring down the club expenses, bring down the, this will actually be lower most years as well, bring down the club expenses, bring down the borrowings, do better with the money we spend to bring revenues up, then between 30, 40 saved here, between the revenues going up 40 to 50, and between bringing the borrowings and finance costs down, we can still invest in our academy. We can still invest in our youth team without losing a bunch of money, without being in danger of PSR, and it gives us the flexibility to spend in the market and at times go over. If we needed to, because we're close, we're 1 year, we want to go big, then we could go a little bit bigger. That's the idea. That is the plan, very simply laid out. It's not PR, it's not BS, it's simply the basics of understanding what we're actually doing from a financial perspective and what is intended to happen and what Ineos are doing. So yes, there are things that are annoying about it. There are things that are painful about it. There are things that are, again, cutting the staff costs, it's not pretty, but reducing those club expenses is a part of the strategy. Spending better, and for now, having to use only what we lose so that we can refill that tank up. At the tank empties, we shed wages, we refill it with that same space that's created, but better, so that we can be consistently in Champions League, consistently at the top of the table, and consistently providing us with more revenue. So we raise the revenue, we reduce expenses. This is basic accounting 101 to get ourselves in a range where we don't live on credit, where we don't live on borrowings, which also reduces the interest payments and finance costs that you have, to where the club can be viable. Even with the Glazer debt, that the club can be viable, because the club should be able to be the size of it. That doesn't make it okay. That doesn't make it acceptable. That doesn't mean that it wouldn't be a whole lot better in the long run, which needs to happen for Sir Jim, for Ineos. I don't care who, actually, to buy the club outright in full and make a deal happen. But the Glazers have to be open to selling so that we don't have to deal with that debt on top of it, because it's an extra problem that can't be solved at the moment. But there are problems that can be solved, where we can still invest in the academy, where we can still invest in the women's team, where we can still do what we need to do, but be financially sound as well. And that is also part of the stadium project, of course. In the long term, aside from getting back in Champions League regularly and competing, a bigger stadium, a whole thing can raise the revenues by another massive amount, 50, 100 million, etc. So they're looking at raise revenues, reduce expenses, every way that is possible to raise revenue and reduce expenses, but not necessarily reducing the expense on wages and transfers, because that's how you end up being uncompetitive. They just have to spend a lot better in those areas. So hopefully that all makes sense. That's what's happening. That's the reality. You can come look at that and you can ask me questions about that, but that is what is going on. That is what they are doing, and they are doing it well, but it will take time. And the big test, of course, of this, and a big part of this, the part that's not so guaranteed, because it's easy to cut expenses. It's easy to do all of that. It's easy to do the math. The hard part is getting the football stuff right. And they've got to do a good job of that. They've got to get us back there. They've got to be smart with their spending. They've got to make sure we do intelligent things moving forward, so that, come maybe still this season, we could still get to Champions League via Europa and such, but maybe, and ideally starting next year, we are generating much more revenue as well, and that will make the financial difficulties less. Now, in addition to the Dorgu deal, there is talk of Alvaro Fernandez. There's an article from Rob Dawson today saying, they're giving consideration to signing him as a fallback option if they can't get Dorgu done. Obviously, Fabrizio mentioned it as well, that they're keeping eyes on Alvaro Fernandez. Like I've said before, I still have my doubts about it, okay? I still have my doubts about it, because he's been there. He's been available for 18 million. He says the buyback is available, right? In this article, he says it's available for 18 million euros. And so I look at it and I think, if we wanted him, then why not have they gone and got him so far? If they thought he was good enough at 18 million, they would go get him. So this is only my opinion on this, because I don't have any info on it that on that case. But it's pretty clear that he's not their top target. They just bought Diego Leon as well, who's arriving in summer. So it was pretty clear they wanted a more they where they rate players. Kirkez and Mendes and Dorgu are well above Alvaro. So look, we need a left wing back. I wouldn't be mad if we did it, but at the same time, I still have my doubts that we would end up doing it. because after going for our top target, and it being, we could have afforded Alvaro before moving on Antony. We didn't have to make a deal to get Antony, right? The Antony movement didn't make the difference between 18 million and 33 million. It made the difference of a few million. Of a few million. So they could have done it already. The fact that they haven't, then I feel he's potentially, I'm not saying he's not an option, but it's obviously not, they're not that strong on him. But hey, let's see. Maybe I'm totally wrong on this. And they say, yeah, he's great. We sign him. He comes on in. I would still be surprised, though. I just would still be surprised if that was the case. I would. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. I'm not saying it's not being given consideration because these are good sources, but at the same time, I guess that it would just be about if they feel it's so desperately needed to get a left wing back that they would take that risk of buying a player that they rate for sure lower to get one in now. So we'll see what they do. We'll see what they do. I like Alvaro Fernandez, but I think it was obvious given that they sold him while Ineos were here, and given that they could have bought him already, I'd be surprised if they rate him high enough to bring him in as a starter level player for us. He for sure would be at good depth, and there's no doubt about that. But we also just got Leon, so I'd be surprised. But let's see what happens on this. Let's see what happens at this point in time. I don't think anything has occurred yet on it, which is what the article says too. Is just being given consideration. I think it's mostly as an alternate target. Maybe that's a part of negotiations as talks are set to continue. And the article says that too, which is that, again, we're going to continue and see. But if we can't get Dorgu, would I be mad about going back for Alvaro? No, because it's not expensive. But do I think that it solves our problem? Also, no, potentially. So, but we'll see. I think some people would really support it. Again, I could be totally wrong on that. And maybe we end up getting Alvaro and he works out extremely well. He solves our problem. He's the left wing back of the future, and we got him for 18 million. That would be really cool. So we'll see what happens there. Okay. So that's what I have for this video. I'll be back tomorrow morning as well, hopefully with some updates ahead of doing a watch along for the game. But again, things talks are continuing to progress with Chelsea over Garnacho. Rashford continuing to look for replacements. We're checking on players like Nkunku, like others that are being brought up in the discussions, as well as others that we're following, like Dibbling and other players as well. Dorgu talks are set to continue there. I do still believe that is a deal that likely gets done at the end of the day because it's such a big priority. But we may need to try to figure out where the money comes from to pay for that. Even to go up a little bit more. And that's where I have a little bit of, that's the doubt that remains in my mind, is I'm not sure where that money comes from. But if they're pretty confident of getting another loan out, for example, even a Malacia or something, then that would help free up the funds for that too. So we'll see where that goes. That's what I have for today. Thank you for watching. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, turn notifications on. See you in the next video.